What's going on, guys? Jeremy here from Focus Flow, and today I want to talk to you guys about a trick that I use all the time to improve my solo footage, and that trick is keyframing fake camera movement. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, adding camera movement to your footage is going to give it more energy. It's going to make it less boring, and those are two pretty good things that you want to have when filming an action sport like parkour or free running. Now, when you're filming by yourself, you're generally stuck with your camera being on the tripod, therefore no actual camera movement. But we can still fake that movement after the fact when we're editing our footage, and we do that with keyframing. So what is exactly keyframing fake camera movement, and how do we do it? Well, let's head into our editing software and take a look. Alright, so here we are in Adobe Premiere Pro. You do not need to use this particular editing software in order to do these fake camera movements with keyframing. Virtually all editing software should allow you to do the techniques that we're going to be using here. The only difference being that the actual controls themselves might be titled differently. But anyway, we're in our software and we have our clip selected. But as you can see, the camera is on the tripod. There's no actual camera movement going on in this clip because I'm filming by myself. So in order to fake that camera movement, we want to understand how keyframing works, but before we do that, we want to understand how these positioning and scale dials work right here. So right here you see how it says 960 by 540. That is just essentially a coordinate of where this clip is placed. So if we move this coordinate, which is the x-axis here, we can see as soon as we start to move it, this black shows up, because this black is essentially the bottom layer, and then what we filmed right here is this frame, and it's just going over top of that layer. And if you think about it like that, faking camera movement is really as simple as just moving the layer that we recorded. That's basically all we're doing with fake camera movement. But in order to do it without these black bars showing up, in order to actually make it look like we're moving the camera in the frame, what we first have to do is crop in or digitally zoom. Now we can do that in Premiere by using this scale tool. As we move this up, that's going to scale to be larger, and as we move it back, it's going to shrink. 100 is going to be just 100% of its original size. All we have to do is enlarge our clip enough that it's not going to show those black bars, and therefore it'll make it look like the camera itself is either panning or tilting. So we do that simply by scaling this up here. Let's do it at 160. And now when we move this position, it actually looks like the camera itself is moving, and we can of course move it on the x-axis like I just showed, or the y-axis. Additionally, we can add some roll to the camera by using the rotation here, and then scale is affecting the zoom in and zoom out essentially. So now that we generally understand how this camera movement is being done simply just by moving the frame digitally, we can start looking in how to program that movement to play how we want it. Let's say I want to have the camera, quote unquote, pan with me as I'm moving in this line. So the way we do this is by first identifying which axis we want the camera to move on. Well, we just said we want it to move from right to left, so obviously that's going to be this x-axis here. So because we're going to be moving the image like that, we're going to want to make sure we scale in a certain amount. The more panning we want to fake, the more we're going to have to zoom in on the image. Make sure you're scaled proportionally to how much you want to be moving along these axes. So now that we've scaled in how much we want to be scaled in, keyframing is essentially just designating a start coordinate and an end coordinate, and then the program itself will edit everything in between to make it look like the camera is moving from those 2 points. The magic of this keyframing animation happens with this little icon right here. So to start out, we're going to go to the beginning of the clip where we want the camera movement to start. So if I want the camera to follow me, I'm going to start it here, right about here. So there's no black bars exposed and I am still in the frame. And I'm just going to click here where it says toggle animation. Now that we've selected that as our starting point, all we have to do is go towards the, let's say, the end of the clip right here, and then we're going to move the coordinates once we're here at the end of the clip to where we want the end point to be. In this case, obviously we don't want any black bars, so let's make full use of that real estate that we zoomed in on and do it just before those black bars hit. So this is our endpoint, and because we selected that animation, all it's doing is taking those 2 points that we selected, and it's going to travel to those in the time that it takes for this clip to be, complete. So we start here and we just press play, and we can see, boom, we have a fake pan that was added to our clip. And now if we compare that to the original clip, that looks pretty boring. I think that's a lot better. So just by designating a start and end point, we made this camera movement that adds, in my opinion, a lot to the shot. And this is just the start of it. Using this technique, we can apply all sorts of different camera movements to the individual clip. So another simple camera movement we can use, or fake, is zooming in and zooming out. Zooming in basically takes even less steps than anything else because you're gonna start at 100. Well, you don't have to, but I like to. And by starting at 100, that's the default it's set to anyway. So I'm just going to select the animation here. It's going to keyframe this as our starting point at 100 or maximum percent of the clip. Go to the end here, and then we'll say, let's put it at that 140. And now doing that, that's our end point. And then throughout the clip, we're going to have a zooming in effect. So that's another really easy one to do. And we can also, like I said, mess with the rotation or the roll of the camera. Keep that scale at 140, let's say, for the sake of this. And we'll start the rotation 14 degrees. We'll add our little animation and then select our endpoint to -14. And then bam, we have a rotating clip. Now, depending on the types of clips you're working with and the vibe you're going for and all that, you may or may not be making movements that are this noticeable. Even just a really soft zoom in from like scale 100 to 120 can be more than enough to make the footage look a lot better, even if it's more subconscious. So those are some of the basic movements you can do, but you can add more dimension to the movements by stacking them on top of each other. So instead of just using the x-axis, going left to right, or just using the y-axis, you can do both to create more diagonal movements, and you can also add more keyframes in order to get multiple different types of movement in one clip. So for this clip, let's kind of do what we did with this original one where we just panned along, but instead of just panning in the direction that the line's going, let's make it a little more complex than that. Let's make the camera actually track me. So in order to do this, we're gonna wanna make use of both the X and Y axes in the same keyframe. We're also going to be utilizing multiple keyframes in one clip, not just that starting point and end point, but a bunch of different points in between. Start in, just like always, by scaling in. And for this, I'm going to do 150 because I'm going to want a good amount of wiggle room. As before, we're going to start our point with me being in the frame, toggle the animation just like we did. This is going to be our start point, all right? Now, anytime we move the cursor and then start moving the keyframes, that's going to add another keyframe. So for instance, if I go here partway through the clip and then let's say I move up and to the left, let's say that, well, all of a sudden that's going to be the end point because that's what we started moving. So now we have that weird endpoint, but it can still go further. So let's say I go now to the end and I want it to end back down and even more to the left. Now there's going to be two different movements that are going on. There's going to be that first movement and then it's a slow decline to the second movement. So now instead of having basically a point A to point B, which is the end one, we have a point A and then B, which is like up here, and then a point C, which is down here. And you can have essentially unlimited points between point A and point, well, the end point. And having more points will allow you to do more in-depth, more complex camera movements in one single clip. All right, so like I said before, I want this clip to actually track me, not just pan with me, but really basically keep me as centered as possible and really like go up and down, kind of fluid with the movements that I'm doing in the line. So as you can see, I did a front flip here, which is going to move me up a little bit higher in the air than I was when I was on the ground. So what I'm gonna do for this particular clip is try to match that height by elevating the camera a little bit. We're also gonna move that x-axis. So now we already created our first start and end point, and as a result, we have this that goes kind of like that. And as you can see, we can get even more complex than this because when we start off here, the camera immediately starts going to that second point, which is up, but when I'm jumping to do this flip, I don't actually start taking off until right about there, but the camera's already on its way up. So if I really want to look like I'm tracking myself, let's get even more in depth here. Let's get rid of that keyframe And let's put one where I'm right here. Let's move the x-axis a little bit there. And that's our second point. And now, once we go up here, then we're gonna start moving this a little bit. And now the camera really does a better job tracking. Notice how it starts here and it's not going up until after I start taking off. That's kind of what we're looking for. Although I also want to adjust this x-axis here. Let's see, let's go to the peak of the jump where I'm at the highest point, probably right about there. I'm gonna move that right about there, and I'm also going to continue to move that x-axis right about there. So now we have a shot that really looks like I'm tracking myself here. Notice how that camera is like seamlessly moving. Like as I'm jumping, that camera movement starts going up. Now these tracking shots can provide a lot of energy for your clip. So I'm gonna continue to just keep making different adjustments to this clip based on where I am in the actual frame, and then I'll show you what that looks like at the end. I'm pretty happy with that clip right there for a pretty basic tracking, and if we take a look at that, it looks like this. Not bad. Once you understand that you can do this type of fake camera movements in post and in editing, it also becomes very viable even when you do have someone who's filming, because then you can add certain types of effects and certain different movements that aren't as easy to get, or if possible to get, in camera. For instance, this tracking move right here, this type of movement was really popular in that one AirPods commercial where they basically tracked the ear of the subject as they did whatever it was, and that AirPod stayed in the center of the frame the entire time. It was really cool. This is a very loose version of that, and they actually have software that's dedicated for that. But the point is, no actual cameraman could keep that AirPod directly in the center of the frame the entire time. So even when you have a filmmaker, you can see how these keyframes, this type of technology, can help you get the exact shot you want. So don't underestimate the power of this fake camera movement. I use it all the time, probably in every single one of my videos. Don't quote me on that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Even on videos like this where I'm just doing talking headshots, creating a little keyframe helps keep it more entertaining, keep it more energetic. But yeah, that about does it for this tutorial. I really hope these tips help you. I hope you use them. And if you do use these tips and apply it in your own video, then share the link in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to check it out. So that's all for today, guys. I'm Jeremy with Focus Flow. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.